I want to ask the people here who care about me, Jessica, Jeremy, Mike Ryan, Chris Cody, Amin, David Sampson, how I should feel after, I don't know, close to 30 years in journalism, no, more than 30 years in journalism, that I now have to pay attention to Tyler Hero removing Miami Heat guard from his bio and changing his header on his social media. How should I feel about that?
I think he unfollowed the Heat too.
You should feel old.
How did players do that in like the 80s and 90s? Like, how did you send a passive-aggressive message to your team?
Such a good question.
He didn't. You know why? In the 80s and 90s, we were direct, aggressive. None of this, I'm from the year 2000 and I have feelings. None of that stuff. You went up to your manager and you spat in his face. And that's how he knew to respect you.
Men.
Not true at all. You were scared of the authority figures. The authority figures had even more power than they have today.
You talk to like a reporter, right? And then something would be written in the paper.
Yeah, quietly.
You
would talk to me. Maybe this is why it makes me sad. Mike Ryan is not in a good place with the reporting going on around Damian Lillard, because you've got two different information insiders that are hugely credible saying totally different things about Damian Lillard and Portland. You've got Damian Lillard intent, according to Shams, on going to Miami and nowhere else. And I'd like the executives, the former executives in the room, to explain to me what that means, because I thought that Damian Lillard might be a breaking point on, does he get what he wants? Is he good enough and strong enough with a no-trade clause to get Portland to make him do what all the other superstars have made their teams do and make sure that Portland gets less than they might get otherwise just because he wants it?
Doesn't have a no-trade clause.
So
No, I know.
Start with that he doesn't get to control. What his agents are doing, they're doing a great job of leaking right now. Talking about other teams that were interested. Portland has been given talking points to say we're not going to settle. We're not just going to trade him to the Heat because he wants to go to the Heat. But now they've leaked the leaker. So the new message point is Lillard will be very unhappy if he's anywhere but Miami, which is supposed to make a front office person say, oh, God, we can't trade for a guy who's going to come in and be an absolute turd in the locker room immediately. So therefore, we're not going to trade for him.
Would you ever be afraid to acquire someone who says, I don't want to go there?
Absolutely not, because fine, don't play.
He's not a good person
But
to
it-
ask.
no,
though.
no, no,
He's
no.
not a
Are
good
you?
person.
No,
You're not a good person
from
to
the
ask,
from
though,
the-
because
You could have just ended that at you're not a good person.
Yeah, I mean, the way that you do this, he does this maximum not caring about anybody's human feelings.
No. I'm not talking about Portland. I'm talking about if you were another team. So, I'd love to get Damian Lillard. And the cost for you to get into this is multiple first-round picks, maybe some young prospects that you really value in your organization. For a guy who's saying bluntly, I don't want to play for you.
Would you go to your owner and say, I don't want Lillard, we're not a better team with Lillard because he doesn't want to be here? Or would you say, this talent wins. This is a talent league. Let's bring him in, and we'll count on whoever we have in-house. We'll count on him to be fine because we're going to help him win a championship.
I think 8 out of 10 GMs say, I can convince, just get him in here, and he'll change his mind. The 9th is actually good enough to make it happen. And then the 10th is smart enough to say, I can't give up stuff for someone who does not want to be here.
So you're the 10th.
I probably would be the 10th, yeah.
When you talk about Damian Lillard in particular in this making a mess scenario, now this was hypothetical and a couple of years ago, but Dame did once say that if he was going to demand a trade, he would want to make sure that it was to the place that he wanted, or else he'd be willing to sit out games.
He once said it. Was he like 12 when he said it?
It was 2 years ago.
Let's
Making sure.
Let's cover some of this here, because it is funny, right, that LeBron James played 11 years in a place and never asked for a trade and was viewed as traitorous, and Damian Lillard plays 11 years at a place and asked for a trade and somehow is more loyal than LeBron James. But Amin, as it relates specifically to what Portland's responsibility is, Portland's responsibility is to get the best players, period. I don't see why once he requests the trade, they have to care in any way what Damian Lillard wants in any way. I feel like he might be a breaking point on players having power, because why does Portland have to adhere to something that will make them worse? Why do they have to make a choice on behalf of Damian Lillard when it's not reasonable to think that if they send someone, if they send him to OKC or someplace where he doesn't really want to live, but if they choose to send him to Brooklyn because that's the better offer, why couldn't they do that?
If I may, you said that I was frustrated with the media coverage of it, and you just said flatly it would make them worse, and I don't think that that's the state of Miami's package. I really don't. But you don't need your third eye open for this one. I mean, you can
one
eye open
with an eye patch on.
We understand why this is playing out in the media space the way that it is, with Shams being pro Damian Lillard. He only wants to play for Miami, and Woj say, pump the brakes. I don't have to send him anywhere, and this package isn't good enough for Portland because a Draft Express former employee, which is like Woj's protege arm, now works as the assistant GM in Portland. So they were actually working through Woj to gain some leverage in a situation where normally when a superstar does this, which actually isn't all that often, by the way, if you look at the history in the 21st century of stars demanding trades, most of the big stars that have ever done this have only done this once. And then there's James Harden, who's done it 3 times in the last 36 months.
The funny thing is, you guys keep saying Shams is like, it's every major reporter not affiliated with the worldwide leader. They're all saying it's Miami. It's Miami, and there is no wiggle room there. And meanwhile, we got for a couple of hours on Friday or Saturday, well, don't rule out San Antonio yet, which to me it blew my mind that someone would go to air and have multiple people under them also go to air talking about this, because it's unconscionable to bring up San. You could say, hey, there's a long list of teams that are interested. You know, the Nets are interested, the Sixers are, hell, the San Antonio Spurs are interested. Of course, everyone's interested. But when they're talking about don't rule out San Antonio.
It was actually the scroll on ESPN during their NBA show on Saturday that said that Dame had deep respect for the Spurs. It didn't imply anything other than he deeply respects. He might just be a Popovich fan. He was just saying that as an aside when he was, I like Miami. But as an aside, I have deep respect for the Spurs. That's how people talk.
But
right?
it's not just ESPN. It's also The Ringer, which I think is just all like Boston Celtics fans freaking out when they're writing. Kevin O'Connor sent out literally the longest tweet in the history of the platform.
How do you know?
I don't even know how
he needs
he
to
was.
be stopped.
How
He
can you
needs to be
tweet that
stopped.
much?
He's the reason we ran into the rate limit problem. It was that tweet from Kevin O'Connor where he was saying that Tyler Hero and a bevy of picks and I think Kyle Lowry was a terrible trade. And in this terrible trade, Nurkic actually goes to the Heat, which is all Portland is looking to do. Get someone to take Nurkic. And that makes it a good trade for Portland.
That makes it a good trade for Miami, if you're going to be honest.
If we're going to go into the tax, I'd rather go into the tax for Nurkic than Ben Simmons, which is another thing that's floating out there right now. But then he follows it up with, Brogdon and Time Lord for Damian Lillard. That's the trade that you make. And all of these people judging Miami's trade, I think, really devalues what Tyler Hero actually is. There's this narrative out there that Tyler Hero is a bad contract. And I understand the pivot that Tyler Hero is not great for Portland and their project right now. How? How is a 23-year-old on $27 million who's averaging over 20 points a game, who's not this inefficient player by any stretch of the imagination, how is he a bad contract? How is he a bad player when you're rebuilding? He's an asset.
I think the reason why is because you have 3 guys that you're pretty confident about who don't make $27 million. That's why. And so it's all posturing.
Who do some of the same things.
Who do many of the same things. Right?
Simons.
I said Simmons?
No. I'm just saying one of the players that does in terms of roster duplication.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, look, if Scoot Henderson is going to be what Scoot Henderson is going to be, you probably don't want him fighting another guy for touches and minutes so early. But the reality, Dan, is you say, why shouldn't Portland demand to have the best players coming back? The best players possible, yes, but there are many objectives when you're trading away your franchise player. It's not just getting great players back. And in fact, in the NBA, I would argue most of the time it's not getting great players back. Those Gone are the days of trading Adrian Dantley for Mark Aguirre. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. Now it's like someone's getting the star and someone's getting a better future. And the better future comes in the draft picks. It comes on young prospects that you think could grow into being something. And it comes in salary cap flexibility. And Lillard's deal is long, but also if you want him, you're going to take Nurkic, right? So then if it turns into, well, we can't do a one-to-one deal because you don't like the young player I'm trying to send you, Tyler Hero. So now we get a third team, and it's Brooklyn. And Brooklyn's saying, okay, I'm down to take Hero and send some picks that way, but you guys got to do me a favor. What's the favor? You got to take my Ben Simmons contract off. So then it expands more, and they're trying to find more places because not only is it a bad contract to be paying out cash-wise, but salary cap-wise in terms of how much flexibility we have, but with the new collective bargaining agreement, there are all sorts of penalties the deeper you go into this. And so if you're Miami, Mike, to your point, it's not about Ben Simmons, I don't think he's good anymore. Whatever. That's kind of irrelevant. You'll take a flyer on him. The problem is he pushes you into that second apron territory where it's like, this is your team, and it's not going to change.
This deal gets done the second, if that second ever comes. And right now, I'm with the Heat in playing this out and seeing how long you can stretch this out before Portland gets nervous. This deal gets done if Miami just says, yeah, we'll take Nurkic, right?
I don't know. I think there's more pressure happening to get more and more.
Well, Dan, what do you think?
Who cares what I think, Mike? Everyone seems to have a lot of opinions on this.
Well,
And David wanted to say something about this too.
I was just a little surprised that you're talking about a team, Portland. If they had their druthers, they wouldn't trade Lillard. They're not trying to rebuild or retool. And so the question is, should a player force a front office to change what their plan is? And I am a hard no on that.
Dan, can you finally give your thoughts on your show in the next segment about the Damian Lillard Miami Heat story, please?
What are you smiling about? We'll talk Marlins next.